My grandfather passed away today. He was 86 years old. He had spent decades of his life preaching the gospel, and now he has passed on to his reward. I was recently reading the book of Deuteronomy, and a phrase stuck out to me like it never had before. And it comes in a few different forms in the first few books of the Bible to refer to when someone passed away. To be gathered to your people, to lie down with your fathers, to join your fathers. And perhaps it's because I've recently become a father myself that this language jumps out at me. I've been noticing just how much fatherhood is replete through the scriptures. I've been noticing it for a few years now, but in the last few months especially, it's only intensified. One of the things that you learn when you become a father, and you don't really learn it because you already knew it, but it suddenly becomes real and visceral and undeniable. It's that you're not the center of the universe. A child is really good at disabusing you of that false belief. Suddenly, your place in the world feels much, much smaller because you realize that you're not all that there is. Not by a long shot. And you begin to realize, and again, it's not that you didn't realize it before, but it becomes suddenly profound that you come from a long line of fathers, back through time immemorial, all who lived and died, contributing a part of themselves into what eventually would become you, and which you will in turn pass on to your son. And it's with those thoughts that I've begun to think differently about one of the more maligned parts of the Bible, the parts that most people think are the boring, insignificant parts, the genealogies. You know, the parts with the long lists that say this man begat this man, who begat this man, who begat this man, and so on. It's lists of strange names that pass by as you try not to let your eyes glaze over. Generation by generation slips by in a few sentences, and hundreds, if not thousands of years have suddenly vanished into the past, with no more memorial than just a name. This too makes one feel small and insignificant. Entire lives, years of experiences, decades of accomplishments, summed up in a name. All else forgotten to time. It's true what the preacher says, that all is vanity and a chasing after the wind. A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. These genealogical lists shout out a profound and terrible truth, that we will not live forever. We will pass away. And all that will be left will be a name on a list, if you're lucky. Though my grandfather is gone, I think of all the memories I have of him. I can remember how his voice sounded. I can remember his smile. I can remember his kindness and his generosity. I can remember the family gatherings. I can remember a road trip that I took with him one time. And these memories will remain with me for a long time, but they will inevitably fade. But even more so for my son, his great-grandfather won't even be a memory. He'll only be a name, perhaps with some stories attached, a few photos of a man that he never met. And if my son has children, then the memory of that man will be even more distant still. And so it is. It's the way of the world under the sun. When Moses came to the end of his life, and as it says, he was about to lie down with his fathers, he had to pass on the responsibility of taking the Israelites into the promised land to Joshua, to the next generation. For all that Moses accomplished in his long life, there were still things left undone that he could not accomplish. And this too is the way of the world. There is always more to do, and no matter how long or how productive a life you live, you are still going to be leaving something undone for the next generation. And even if it were possible to accomplish everything in your lifetime, the next generation is still going to have their own adventures, their own battles, their own accomplishments. There's no point in this life under the sun where one generation will accomplish everything and leave his progeny with everything accomplished and nothing to do. We each have our missions in life, and we must also pass on the work to the next generation. And we must, because it's inevitable. Death comes for us all. The preacher also said, it's better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting, because that is the end of every man. And the living takes it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, and the mind of the wise is in the house of mourning. It's a sobering feeling to know that one day we will pass from this earth. And so too, even our memories will pass from this earth. And as I said, it makes one feel very small. But not so small as to say that you're insignificant. Think of it this way. We all come from unbroken lines of ancestors going back farther than we know. Whether we know their names or not, whether we know who they were, they literally shaped us. They gave us our DNA. They set their children on a certain path, who then in turn set their children on a certain path, which eventually somehow, perhaps even miraculously, led to us. And perhaps with that thought, one might get a big head and say, I am the culmination of this line of fathers. I am the apex. But that's delusional thinking. One, Because while in the present moment you might be the culmination, you won't last forever. And so you can't be the apex, because there's something coming after you. And two, even your own existence is dependent on your ancestors. And so how can something that's the apex be not only dependent on something, but dependent on everything? You and I are not the apex of humanity. We are simply a link in a chain that started long before us and will go on into the future beyond us. Just like our ancestors were links in the chain that led to us, we are links to the generations that are coming in the future. And what happens in the future, in part, is determined by how we live right now. What you do is going to reverberate down through history. What you do is going to have an impact on your physical descendants. But not just your physical descendants, but also the people whose lives you affect. That will reverberate through their descendants as well. Your actions have consequences, and that's going to go on and on until the end of time. And that is a rather large responsibility. And so my grandfather has been gathered to his people and has joined his fathers. His story on this side of eternity has come to a close, and he joins the roles of his ancestors. And it is up to us, the living, to carry on, to live well, and to pass down what is good and right to our children, so that they can do the same when it is our turn to also be gathered to our people and to join our fathers. Rest in peace and memory eternal. Richard, the son of Charles, the son of Charlie, the son of Gideon, the son of Solomon, the son of Jacob, the son of Jacob, the son of Isaac.